The divorce papers had been signed. The marriage was officially over. And the next morning, they had to go back to work. Same studio, same songs, same microphones, same smiles for the cameras. Two people who had built a life together and then watched it come apart now had to stand side by side on the biggest stages in the world and pretend that everything was fine. Not for a day, not for a week, but for years. And what happened inside that pretending, what it cost them, and what it ultimately produced, is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of popular music. This is the story of Björn and Agnetha. And this is the story nobody told you. Before we go any further, think about what this actually means. You fell in love, you got married, you built something together that the entire world admired. And then it ended. The way things end. Not with a single dramatic moment, but slowly, quietly, in the accumulation of 1,000 small distances. And then one day you are sitting across from a lawyer, signing your name to a piece of paper that says it is over. And the next morning your alarm goes off, and you get up, and you go to work, and the person you just divorced is already there, waiting, with a cup of coffee and a professional smile. And the show must go on. What does that do to a person? What does it do to two people? And what does it do to the music they make together? Björn Ulvaeus was born on April 25th, 1945, in Gothenburg, Sweden. He was not the kind of person who wore his emotions on the outside. He was precise, methodical, a craftsman who approached songwriting the way a carpenter approaches wood, with patience, with attention to detail, and with a deep respect for the material. He did not chase inspiration. He worked, every day, until the song came. Agnetha Feldskog was born on April 5th, 1950, in Jönköping. She was the opposite in almost every way. Intuitive where Björn was analytical, emotional where he was composed, interior where he was pragmatic. She did not approach music as a craft. She approached it as a confession. Every song she sang was something she meant. Every note carried the weight of something real. When they met in the late 1960s, the attraction was immediate and obvious and inevitable. Two musicians, two extraordinary talents, two people who communicated most naturally through sound. They married in 1971. Linda was born in 1973, and for a while, everything made sense. But fame has a way of testing the things you thought were solid, and ABBA's fame was not ordinary fame. It was the kind that follows you into every room, that makes every private moment feel observed, that turns the most intimate parts of your life into material for other people's speculation. Björn and Agnetha handled it differently. Björn retreated into work. Agnetha retreated into silence. And the distance between those two retreats grew slowly, steadily, until one day it was too wide to cross. They divorced in 1979, and the next morning they went back to work. The question everyone asked, but nobody answered publicly, was how? How do you do it? How do you stand next to your ex-wife on a stage in front of 50,000 people and sing a love song and make it believable? How do you sit across from your ex-husband in a recording studio and listen to him play a melody he wrote about something you both lost and not break? The answer, as far as anyone who was there could tell, was professionalism. A word that sounds cold when applied to something this human, but it was real, and it was remarkable. Björn and Agnetha had made a decision, not together, not in a conversation that anyone witnessed, but separately, privately, each on their own. The decision was this: the music was bigger than what had happened between them, and they would honour the music, even when they could not honour the marriage. This is easier to say than to do, much easier. The 1979 tour was the first major test. They were on the road for months. Same tour bus, same hotels, same backstage corridors. The choreography of their performances required them to move together, to make eye contact, to project intimacy to audiences who had no idea that the intimacy was gone. And they did it, night after night, city after city, with a precision that those who saw it called remarkable, and those who lived it called survival. Benny and Annie were still together during that tour, which meant that backstage there were two distinct emotional atmospheres existing simultaneously: the couple that was still intact and the couple that was not, and everyone navigating carefully around the difference. The music they made during this period reflects none of this, and all of it. On the surface, the songs are polished, professional, melodically brilliant. Benny and Björn's songwriting partnership had never been stronger. The productions had never been more sophisticated. But underneath, if you listen carefully, there is something in Agnetha's voice that was not there before. A weight, a knowledge, the sound of someone who is singing about things she actually knows, from the inside. Voulez-vous was recorded during this period, and Gimme Gimme Gimme, and The Winner Takes It All, which came slightly later, but which grew directly out of this time. These are not songs written by people who are fine. These are songs written by people who are doing the work of being fine, which is a very different thing. But here is what nobody expected. In doing the work of being fine, in showing up every day and making the music, Björn and Agnetha created something between them that was perhaps more durable than the marriage had been. A working relationship built on mutual respect, on shared history, on the understanding that what they made together was worth protecting, even when everything else had fallen away. It wasn't love anymore, but it was something. And in the context of what they had lost, something was extraordinary. This is the part of the story that gets lost in the headlines about divorce and drama, because the drama is easier to write about. But the real story, the harder story, is the one about two people who chose, every single day, to keep making something beautiful out of something broken, and what that choice cost them, and what it gave them back. There was a concert in 1979, in Gothenburg, but people who were there still talk about. It was toward the end of the tour. Everyone was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that goes deeper than sleep can reach. And that night, something happened on stage that nobody planned. Agnetha was singing. The song was one of their ballads, slow, intimate, the kind of song that requires you to mean it. And, in the middle of the second verse, she and Björn made eye contact, just for a moment, the way you do on stage, automatically, instinctively, and something passed between them. Nobody in the audience could have named it. The cameras didn't catch it. But the people backstage, the musicians, the crew who had been with them for months, they saw it. It was grief, clean and simple and undramatic. Two people, in the middle of 50,000 people, completely alone with something they had lost. And then the moment passed. Agnetha kept singing. Björn kept playing. The show went on. Because the show always went on. That was the agreement. That was the decision they had each made separately, in the privacy of their own hearts. After the tour ended, they returned to Stockholm, to separate homes, to separate lives that had to be navigated carefully because of Linda, who was 6 years old, and who needed both of them to be her parents more than the world needed them to be ABBA. This is something that gets lost in the story of famous divorces, the children. Linda Ulvaeus grew up watching her parents perform together after their marriage ended, watching them smile at each other for cameras, watching the world celebrate a love that no longer existed in the form the world believed it did. What does that do to a child? What does it teach her about love and performance and the gap between the two? Nobody asked. Linda has spoken rarely and carefully about her childhood. What she has said suggests she was loved and protected, and that both of her parents tried, which is perhaps all any child can ask for. But the trying, in those circumstances, must have required everything they had. By 1980, the recording sessions for Super Trooper were underway, and the working relationship between Björn and Agnetha had found a kind of equilibrium. Not comfortable, exactly, but functional, professional, even, occasionally, warm. They had known each other for over a decade. They had made a child together. They had made some of the most celebrated music of the century together. Whatever had broken between them, the knowledge of each other remained. And knowledge, even painful knowledge, creates a kind of intimacy that doesn't disappear just because the love does. The Winner Takes It All was released in the middle of all of this, and its success, its extraordinary, overwhelming, borderline, unprecedented success, did something unexpected. It gave Björn and Agnetha a language for what had happened between them. Not a private language, a public one. A song that the whole world could sing, that contained, encoded in its 4 minutes and 55 seconds, the truth of what they had been through. And there was something, not exactly comforting, but clarifying about that. The world knew now. Not the details, but the shape of it, the emotional truth of it, and that, paradoxically, made the private version easier to carry. The final chapter of this story is not the divorce. It is not the tours. It is not even the winner takes it all, extraordinary as that recording was. The final chapter is what happened after. And what happened after is one of the most quietly remarkable things in the history of popular music. Björn and Agnetha did not become enemies. They did not disappear from each other's lives. They co-parented Linda, and later Peter, with a care and consistency that those who know them describe as genuine. They remained, in the deepest sense of the word, connected. Not as a couple, but as two people who had been through something enormous together, and had chosen, on the other side of it, to remain in each other's lives. This is rarer than it sounds, much rarer. Most relationships that end completely. The people drift apart. The shared history becomes a closed door. But Björn and Agnetha kept the door open. Not wide, not always comfortably, but open. Because of Linda, because of the music, because of something in each of them that understood, on a level deeper than hurt or pride, that what they had made together was worth more than the wreckage of how it had ended. Years passed. ABBA dissolved. The world moved on, and didn't. Björn kept writing. He worked on Chess, the musical, with Benny and Tim Rice. He worked on Mamma Mia. He stayed busy in the way that people who need to create stay busy, not as distraction, but as oxygen. Agnetha made solo albums, retreated, emerged occasionally, retreated again, lived her life on her own terms, which had always been, quietly, what she had wanted. And then, in 2021, they were in the same room again, all four of them, for Voyage. Nobody who was there has described exactly what that reunion felt like for Björn and Agnetha specifically. The interviews have been careful, diplomatic, professional. But Benny said something in one conversation that stuck with people. He said that when the four of them sang together for the first time in 40 years, it was as if the time between had not existed, as if the voices remembered something the people had forgotten. Think about what that means. 40 years, 2 divorces, separate lives, separate worlds. And yet, when the music started, something remained, something that had survived everything. The marriages ending, the band dissolving, the silence, the decades. Something that could not be broken by any of it, because it existed in a place that hurt and time and loss cannot reach. That something is the music. And the music, as it turned out, had been keeping everything safe all those years, while the people moved through their lives and made their choices and carried their private griefs. The music was holding all of it, waiting, patient, certain, in the way that only truly great things are certain, that the people who made it would eventually find their way back. And they did. Björn and Agnetha stood in the same room for the first time in 40 years and made something together. Not because the hurt was gone, not because the past had been rewritten, but because what they had made, what they had given to the world through all of it, was worth one more moment of standing together, worth one more song, worth one more time of looking through the glass and nodding and beginning. The stage lights may have gone out, but what was made in that light endures. In every radio, in every wedding, in every quiet moment when someone hears those first notes and stops whatever they are doing and remembers something they thought they had forgotten. Björn and Agnetha made that, together, out of something broken. And that, perhaps, is the most extraordinary thing any two people have ever done with a divorce.